you realize what month it is?
Well, it's October, which means Halloween. Duh.
That's right, which means...
Wait, do you mean...
That's right, Rob, Castlevania. There's nothing like it during this time of the month. But I thought we'd do something a little daring, a little different, a little ambitious, I'd say. So I went out and rebought the PlayStation 2 version, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Party pooper?
Now, when it comes to Castlevania, people usually think of two different eras. The first is the retro style from the late 80s and early 90s. And then there is the Metroidvania type games that was started with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and then continued with games like Order of Ecclesia and Dawn of Sorrow.
But most people tend to forget about the 3D Castlevania games, and generally write them off in advance. And it's not without good reason. I mean, when you even mention the word 3D Castlevania, most people immediately think of the Nintendo 64 games, which notably were not really good. So, I guess the whole reputation of 3D in general was just down the crapper.
But what about the games that came out on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox eras? We are talking about Castlevania Lament of Innocence and Castlevania Curse of Darkness. People do not seem to talk about these games very much. I mean, it could also be because Devil May Cry came out during this time period, as well as may have overshadowed them. Which, if you think about it, would make sense, because some say that Devil May Cry is what Castlevania should have been in 3D from the start.
But what about the 3D Castlevania games? Do they have anything to offer at all? Or are they just better graphical versions of otherwise well-known crap? Well, let's take a look. The PlayStation 2 first Castlevania game, Lament of Innocence.
Castlevania Lament of Innocence was released on the PlayStation 2 in October of 2003, just in time for Halloween. This game was designed to tell the origins of the Belmont clan and the start of their blood feud with the Prince of Darkness, Count Dracula. Now, originally, that title went to Castlevania Legends, and its protagonist, Sonia Belmont. A brief history for those of you who don't know. Once upon a time, there was a Game Boy game called Castlevania Legends, and it starred a female wielder of the vampire killer, named Sonia Belmont. She became the first Belmont in the timeline to defeat Dracula. Now, in the ending, she becomes a mother, and it is implied that Alucard is the father. Now, Legends is supposed to take place in 1450, while Castlevania Dracula's Curse takes place in 1476, which would mean that Sonia and Alucard are the parents of Trevor Belmont.
Whoa! I just blew my own mind.
I know, crazy, right? Anyway, Sonia was also set to appear in a Sega Dreamcast game called Castlevania Resurrection. But that all changed thanks to Koji Igarashi. Apparently, he hated Castlevania Legends and retconned that game and Sonia Belmont out of existence, as well as cancelled Resurrection. He stated a while back that he did not like the idea of having a female protagonist in the respective time period that Castlevania took place. Eee, I'm sure the feminists would love to hear that. Well, Koji's next game, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, will feature a female protagonist, so hopefully they'll take it easy on him. Anyway, moving on, Castlevania Lament of Innocence takes place in the 11th century and follows the tale of Leon Belmont, a brave and respected knight. He and his good friend Matthias keep the peace in their land. All is well, until Matthias's woman dies, leaving him an empty shell of a man. Leon continues on without him, until his beloved Sarah is kidnapped. Matthias informs him that it was the work of a vampire named Walter Bernard, and that he has taken her to his forest of eternal night. Leon enters the forest where he meets an old alchemist named Rinaldo Gandolfi. He lives in a shack where he helps newcomers face off against Walter. Supposedly, this is all just a game to the vampire, and he has chosen Leon as his new playmate. Ronaldo sees potential in Leon and gives him a whip and enchants his gauntlet that allows him to use magic items. Leon then enters Walter's castle to rescue his lady love. After confronting Walter and rescuing Sarah, all was thought to be well, until Sarah showed that something terrible had befallen her. Walter had escaped, but not before that vampire bite which sealed her fate. Ronaldo, back at the shack, explains to Leon of her unfortunate curse, and while Leon is crushed and in denial about it, Ronaldo goes on to say that her death doesn't have to be in vain. Sarah overhears it and is pretty accepting of it, knowing that if she does have to die, she would rather die for a cause noble and just in order to stop Walter and prevent this from happening again. After performing an alchemy ritual, Leon does the hardest thing he's ever had to do in life and strikes down Sarah with the whip, infusing it with her power, transforming it into the well-known vampire killer, the weapon that would be passed down from generation to generation. Leon, with his reignited motivation, confronts Walter atop the castle, where it's revealed after the battle that Walter, in fact, was a pawn to a much greater evil. Death himself shows up to add complexity and kills Walter, taking his soul and imprisoning it within a stone of crimson. In a stroke of fate, the true master of the castle shows himself, and it turns out to be Matthias, Leon's colleague. Matthias, as it turns out, was using all of them for his own gain, to become an immortal lord of the vampires and to forever curse God. Offering the gift of eternal life to Leon, the vampire hunter makes it known that he will not stand for any of this. Matthias escapes, but leaves Death to fight Leon alone, who honestly fares no better than Walter did. Leon promises from that day forward, his kinsmen and descendants, the Belmont clan, will forever stand ready to defeat the vampire lord. Dawn approaches and Leon leaves the castle, and the legend from there begins. Honestly, I think the story is pretty solid. It starts out simple with a familiar love story with the classic hero saving the woman in distress, but leads to a dramatic and quite heart-wrenching twist when it turns out that your lovely lady in fact cannot be saved. And all that can be done is to invoke an act of mercy for the greater good and to give hope to the future with new powers. Even the final twist with Matthias made sense, even though we never really saw him until now. And the whole venture really does serve as a good foundation for the legend to begin. And I like that. It's simple, but with some nice storytelling, yet not overly complex. Bravo, game. Let's move on. The entire game, with the exception of Ronaldo's shack, takes place inside the castle and uses the Metroidvania style. So I guess you could say that this is kind of like Symphony of the Night in 3D. There are 5 main areas that you will need to complete before you get the chance to face off against Walter. The House of Sacred Remains, the Anti-Soul Mysteries Lab, the Dark Palace of Waterfalls, the Garden Forgotten by Time, and the Ghostly Theater. Tell me these names aren't awesome. Each of these areas have a boss for you to defeat, which includes a golem, a medusa, whatever the hell this is, and a succubus, as well as Joachim Armster, a vampire who was enslaved in Walter's castle. Not to mention, there's also a pesky doppelganger that you're going to run into more times than you'd like. In each area, you travel from room to room and down large hallways. While exploring these elaborate rooms, you can find these save rooms where you can save your progress and restore your health to its maximum. Most of the time when you enter a new room, it usually becomes sealed off until you defeat all of the enemies in there. To help guide you, when you hit the select button, it will bring up the map system, but it will only show the rooms that you've entered. That is, until you find the map, where more of the area will be laid out. But even still, not all of the rooms will be seen, as you can find secret areas and alternative routes throughout the stage.
The game uses a camera style that I would call movie-based. It's not exactly fixed like we're known for having in the Resident Evil games. However, we're still not technically in control of it either. If you're familiar with the Devil May Cry games, it's pretty much like that.
Now, most of the time, it's fine, but there will be those special moments where you are in a tight spot and it can get hard to see what you're hitting. This becomes really more noticeable during boss fights. The objective for every level is fairly similar. There are doors and other places that you will have to unlock, and you have to travel around to find switches, levers, or objects that you need to advance. They pretty much follow the same pattern as any other Castlevania game, but every once in a while, the gameplay will switch things up. To the detriment of the game, some places, for example, will have platforming, which, admittedly, sometimes it does not work with these camera angles. More often than not, you will think that you are at the right angle, only to be proven wrong. It will get very frustrating, and it's a perfect example of adding gameplay additions that were not necessary. But at the same time, Devil May Cry was guilty of this shit too, so... I mean, hey, check out these parts where you have to use the whip to cross over these gaps. Man, that looks unnatural. Another problem that I found that was kind of annoying from time to time is that they map the button that enters a room to the same as the attack button. Because of this, you may try to whip a candle and accidentally go through a door. Also, you're gonna have to line yourself up just right to be able to cross through it. One thing that is pretty funny is that when you re-enter a room that you have beaten previously, even though the enemies all respawn, you can just pass right through them with relative ease. Excuse me, pardon me, coming through.
This game has got a lot of great environments. And I tell you guys, I truly love it when a game goes out of its way to show that it's got some great atmosphere and ambiance to go with the adventure.
Each area in the game is very different from the other, and presents a spooky yet visually alluring place to do battle in. One criticism I have for Metroid games is that many areas in those games tend to look very much alike. I never get that feeling while playing Symphony of the Night, and it carries over here very well. You run into many familiar enemies, from skeletons, zombies, ghouls, hunchbacks, and a few new ones here and there. To battle these foes, Leon is of course armed with his trusty vampire killer. You have a weak attack that can come out quicker, and a strong attack which has a wider strike which leaves you open for a little longer, but it does deal greater damage. While the game does not have a traditional level-up system, you can achieve new attacks throughout your battling. Leon can also collect the variety of sub-weapons that are very traditional to the series, which include the dagger, the cross, the holy water, the axe, and the crystal. You can equip the orbs you obtain by defeating bosses that allow you to do even more powerful attacks with them. The sub-weapons, as you've come to expect throughout this series, are powered up the same way, by hearts that you can find by whipping candles. Naturally. You can guard with your gauntlet to block incoming attacks, but only to a point, as you can potentially experience one of those guard breaks. But with Ronaldo's alchemy, you have the ability to gather magic. When an enemy flashes pink and attacks you, if you are blocking at the right time, your magic meter will fill. When you have a specific relic equipped, you can then execute a special magic attack, like leaving a trail of fire that will damage your enemies. Throughout the game, you can obtain upgrades to your HP, magic, hearts, as well as accessories, armor, and additional whips that you can add to your arsenal as well. Another important item you can get is, well, good old-fashioned cash. When you revisit Ronaldo, you can spend it on items like potions, serums, and even magical tickets that will warp you straight back to his shop if you're ever in a pinch. Kind of funny how, even though your lady's life is on the line, he is still very much a capitalist. Speaking of being in a pinch, be wary, because if you die, it is game over, and you go back to the start of the menu and have to boot up your last save file. So, guys, if there is a save room right in your direction, do not pass it up.
Now, the voice acting in this game is filled with some talented people that you may recognize from English dubs of certain video games and anime.
Leon is voiced by Dave Wittenberg, who is best known as the voice of Kakashi from Naruto. Other notables include Crispin Freeman, Liam O'Brien, and Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. The dialogue they read off is delightfully cheesy, in that good old-fashioned Castlevania way. No, while there is no "die monster, you don't belong in this world" quotes here, we do get some that are fairly close.
I'll beat you to a pulp!
The graphics in this game for the PlayStation 2 era are actually quite good. Again, they are dark, yet still vibrant and colorful, as you would expect from this series. The facial models are a bit stiff and rubbery in some places, but considering the era that it was released, it's still very acceptable. The music, on the other hand, I gotta admit, is not the greatest soundtrack of the Castlevania series, but it does have some awesome tracks, such as the theme music from the House of Sacred Remains, as well as Leon's theme that takes place towards the end of the game. I can't get enough of these tracks. However, the others are moody and fit the scenes, but otherwise probably not the top tier Castlevania soundtracks that we've come to know. Sadly, what is probably the most disappointing about this fact is that there are no renditions of the classic Castlevania theme songs. And it is sadly kind of a missed opportunity. I mean, the Vampire Killer theme would have been perfect on the final level right before you encounter Walter. After beating the game, there are additional modes that you can play the game through. One of them is with Joaquin, who has his own gameplay style, minus the sub-weapons and potion usage. So there is a lot of replayability. Lament of Innocence also has some optional bosses for you to tangle with, as well as many hidden rooms that lead to these optional bosses. But that's if you're truly feeling confident enough in your skills. Guys, let me tell you, some of these secret areas in this game are a major pain in the ass to find. Some of them involve in-depth puzzles and having you backtrack to specific areas, so better have a walkthrough handy because you will be busy if you decide to go the extra mile and prove your worth. And some of these areas are going to require better equipment just to get to them. Such equipment which can be found through more exploration through stages when revisited. But guys, it is well worth it as the rewards do wield better powers and bonus unlockables, including the dangerous hidden foes to be found through locked or well-hidden doors, but usually only after you've acquired most other goods. You know, I honestly forgot how good this game was until I decided to revisit it. Some people may look at this as a poor man's take on the original Devil May Cry, which it is not at all. The game is a well-constructed 3D adventure with a solid story and fun combat. It's not an overly difficult game. The bosses each have a pattern to figure out, but once you do figure it out, they can be dealt with accordingly. Also, the sub-weapons and magic help you out quite a bit. This is really a Castlevania game that should be in any fan's library.
Well guys, there you have it. That's my review of Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Now I want to hear from you guys. Do you think this game is an underrated gem that might have been lost in the PlayStation 2 library due to a poor reputation? Well, I'd love to hear about it. So, join me next time as we check out Castlevania Curse of Darkness.
You still haven't sold that thing at a pawn shop yet?
Oh, kiss my metal ass.
Love you too, Rob.
I guess we'll see you next time.